Welcome back, everybody. This is now episode number 7, I think. Might be wrong, so sorry if I am. How are we doing, Andy? Good to see you, my man.
Good, man. You? Tired?
Yeah. You what?
Tired. Thanks to Twin One.
Yeah, twins. It must be difficult, man. I've had 4 kids, but not obviously having 2 at once is, I can imagine very challenging. So, well, today we're talking about marketing. But before we get started on that, how is everything? Everything all right? How's the business? How's life?
Busy. So obviously we've had the first of the frost. So everything's gone a bit blurry with that. But yeah, you just crack on, don't you? Crack on. Yeah, so obviously we spoke about it. Was it last episode or the one before? About the price tweaking. You have to be fluid. It's important to be fluid with that pricing. Diary's looking full. Up it goes. Diary looking quiet. For the obviously the heating game that we talk about the most, that's generally moves with the seasons. For the other guys, the sparks and whatnot, that just needs to be done as and when, doesn't it? It's in some ways it's more predictable for us, isn't it? We know what's coming. You can start to.
Yeah, we can see the wave coming in, can't we?
Yeah,
we can sort of
get preempt it there.
So I thought what we'd start this off with today is I'm going to say a statement that you see a lot of people say, and that is, I don't need to market my business. I've never advertised and I'm doing well. What would you say to
that? Honest answer.
Yeah.
You're most likely too cheap, and it's probably took you too long to get to where you are.
Yeah, I agree.
Slight caveat, as it depends when you started the business, really, because it is a little bit different in the last sort of 10 to 15 years than it would have been beyond that. But yeah, if anyone's got a business that's sub 10 years old, definitely B2 would have been able to charge more or would have got to where they're at faster.
Yeah. So what is marketing?
You'll probably nail a specific definition better than me, but essentially it's a few things, I suppose, isn't it? So it's getting your business out there. And making people aware of it. So things like brand awareness is marketing, as well as then the more obvious one, what people see out there is they coin it as advertising or lead generation, we might call it. So that can be cold lead generation, hot lead generation. It can be push marketing, or it can be, I suppose, the more prominent one with the trades is potentially lead generation platforms, mainly because obviously the lead is coming to you. So again, it depends. So to follow the conversation we're just having about the seasonal stuff from the heating side of things, the boiler breakdowns, for example, is probably the most common one, where someone's going to come to you, shit, me boiler's broke, I need your help. Whereas to maybe, let's look at the sparks, for example. Maybe you're specialising in swapping fuse boards. Fuse boards tend not to fail, but a lot of them are dangerous in their old style, the old guys, if you will. So that would require a different angle of marketing. That would require that push marketing of getting in front of the customer and saying, do you have one of these fuse boards? Did you know that these don't give you any protection, essentially? So that's a brief from my viewpoint on it.
Yeah, no, I think you're bob on there, mate. I think in my mind, I see today's session talking about sort of 2 clear, distinct sort of ways to market, and the first one, I coined the phrase primitive marketing, and then the sort of second part to it, I guess, would be sort of like new age marketing.
I've just lost your sound then, mate. Sound distant, not knocked the cable or something, have you?
Sorry for that technical delay. I think the sound is back. So where was I going with that? What was I saying? I was talking about primitive marketing and new age marketing. So primitive being you know, older sort of ways of doing things, the little bit sort of more old school way, and then new age, I guess you sort of looking at digital, online, you know, lead generation sites and things like that. So what's your thoughts on, well, what works for you, Andy?
Everything. So again, yeah. So we touched on this a little bit on a previous episode as well, but my opinion of it is that you should do as much as works for your business. But to give a little bit more context on that, some things work better than others, and some things work in different ways. So we spoke about, you know, using certain platforms because it helps with brand awareness, even though it might not be as quick serving as other stuff. So let's say you use Checkatrade, and it absolutely hammers you with leads, and it works very well for your business. And to then use a more direct comparison of a lead gen platform, something like maybe Rated People. It's not going to perform particularly well, but it's another platform that not only is it lead generation, it's also review hosting platform. So someone does a Google search of your business, and it's Rated People is one of those that populates the homepage. Not only that, is it displays your review rating on the bottom. So my perspective on that is that it has a value to it. So if you're paying, keep the numbers easy, £100 a month for Rated People, and you get, let's say, 1.5 jobs from it per month at £100 per job. So by the time you've sent one of your lads out and they've done the job, it's probably at best self-serving from a pure monetary perspective or a revenue driving perspective. However, it's come with that other perk. You get your reviews up there. Someone does a Google search and you've got a lot of platforms. Bang, 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 bang. So again, more is almost always better if you're trying to grow a business, as long as you're not obviously losing loads of money on them. To talk about the primitive side, we've always been a big fan. And I remember this was one of the very first conversations me and you had. We were in agreement on the fact that primitive marketing is massively underutilized in this day and age because it takes more physical energy to do it. And it's much harder to see the metrics on it. If you've got a CRM system like SalesLion where everything's plugged in, from an online perspective, you can see the traffic, you can see the calls, you can see the clicks, so on and so forth. Whereas if you're paying for advertising in, let's say, a local magazine, you're not going to know how many times someone's picked up that magazine. However, again, it's brand awareness. It's like, most lads have the vans wrapped or graphics on the van, but won't know specifically how effective that is, but they want to do it and they choose to do it. Obviously, you can, if you've got a SalesLion, plug the phone number in that you've got on your van, have its own number. Conversation for another day. But it's an extension of that traditional getting the van wrapped, isn't it, really? It's the primitive marketing. But again, it's that brand awareness. We've converted jobs where a customer has rang through and said, "Oh, well, I've seen you in the magazine, and then I've seen you online, and then I had a card come through the door because we pay for card drops as well, which obviously is more primitive marketing." So, yeah, do you genuinely stand by the fact more is almost always better, depending on where you're at in your business. If you've hit a level where you don't want to grow anymore, then you might not have to be super heavy with the marketing. However, to go back to the start of this conversation, the more leads you have coming in, the more you should be throttling your price. So I would argue, even if you've reached the stage where you don't want to grow anymore, you should still be marketing, because you can then start to charge more because you could become more in demand. And then it comes back to that simple supply and demand analogy, which is often lost on the trades, because most lads are tradesmen trying to be a business owner. It's very rare that you see it the other way around.
People do marketing the wrong way round. So what I mean by that is that they turn everything off when they're busy. So they stop spending any money on advertising and that. In my mind, when I'm doing any sort of marketing, it's for the future. Does that make sense? So like right
100%.
now, I want to be focusing on acquiring as many customers as possible, you know, getting my name out there so that when things are quieter, more people are aware of who I am and what we do and how we can help them. But not everyone, but a lot of people do it in reverse. They sort of go quiet, so they pump loads of money into marketing. Obviously, with any sort of marketing, generally it's a slower burn, you know, unless you're buying leads directly like Checkatrade and places like that. You know, general marketing is a slower process. So by the time the marketing takes effect, if you look at like SEO or websites or leaflets or whatever it might be, by the time that takes effect, you know, busy periods kicked in, or they, you know, it's too late. I'm a strong believer in marketing for the future. So like, if I was looking to grow, I would be spending a lot more money now in anticipation of spring and summer, so that I can have that pool of customers that know me, that like me, that trust me, and that will come to me, rather than shoot from the hip in April when it's quiet, trying to find any lead that would come through. Would you agree?
And again, the seasonal trades are the ones where you have to be even more savvy with that. So we've often spoke about we're kind of the opposite to like landscape gardeners, tree surgeon type guys, aren't we? Because it's like it's the reversed spike in the demand, let's call it. So like you say, people will get busy in the winter. If you've got a heating business, switch everything off. Then you come to summer, spring, they panic. Shit, I've gone quiet. You see it all on all the forums. Anyone else dead? You know what I mean? Oh, it's quiet. And that's because of what you just fucking said, isn't it? Like, because they've turned everything off, been too busy, ignored a lot of stuff, ignored customers, ignored new customers maybe to serve the old ones. And then you come out of that period. So yeah, you want to be starting to get stuck in with the marketing when you're already busy, and you can go a little bit further with that, what you said, and implement the slower marketing in those busy periods. Of course, there's marketing that is quicker to react. So Checkatrade is one of them. For anyone that doesn't use it, you can throttle your account quite quickly. So you can upgrade your account and have leads within that new allocation within 48 hours, essentially. Whereas the primitive stuff, there's a time lag to it. So whether that's just dumping out a load of cards where people might look at it and put it in a drawer or something like that till when they need it, or maybe like a local magazine where it has scheduled release points, so they might go out every quarter or whatever. You like, well, okay, you want to speak to those guys in the winter and get scheduled for all of the end of winter into spring stuff. And you can put something in about, you know, summer's the best time to get your boiler serviced, so then you're not using it as much and you can pick up with the issues, whatever it might be. So it's trying to be a bit smart with certain stuff. Yeah, you can throttle the online stuff easier, whether it's your Google ads or Checkatrade or whatever. You can, if you are busy in the winter, you can throttle that down a little bit, pull your budget down a bit. But for the other stuff that has a time lag to it, you've got to do exactly what you said. You've got to like, okay, I want to grow a little bit next year. I'm going to have to start the primitive stuff now. Because again, statistically, something like, and to segue slightly, my recommendation is never to use leaflets. They generally go in the bin. We use an A6 card because that statistically has the best retention rate. So think of a bigger business card. Essentially, they're about that big, aren't they? So what's that? That's A7, A6, about that. Half of an A5, isn't it? So we found them to be big enough to put the information on you want, but be small enough and high quality enough that someone would keep it. Those flimsy, shitty leaflets generally go in the bin. They also look like all the other leaflets, and they're also very hard to post. So if you're paying someone, if you're paying someone for the leaflet drops, they'll be much more appreciative of a stiff, small card. That's much easier to post. You don't have to shove your hand through the door and let the dog bite you and whatever.
You hit a point earlier that we sort of skirted over about the competitiveness. So, back 20 years ago when I first started sort of going out into the world and trying to get work, most businesses were doing primitive marketing. They were doing leaflets, they had business cards, they were leaving brochures, they were, doing all like the physical, tangible stuff. But obviously the rise of the internet, the rise of online marketing, it's become less and less done. And I think that's twofold. One, because it's slower. So in today's world, everything's quick, fast. There's a bit more restriction to it because you've got to physically, you can't just sit in your computer and press a few buttons. You've got to either find someone that's going to go out and deliver it. You've got to design something. You've got to do physical activity. But there's a huge market for it, I believe, because so many businesses aren't doing it anymore. They're putting all their eggs into modern new age marketing, lead sites, websites, Google ads, all of that sort of thing, which there is a place, I'm not demonizing that. I used it for many years. I used Google ads, Checkatrade, and it's worked wonders at times for my businesses. But you should, this is like how I coach like new lads that join, you should not be spending a penny online until you're doing all of the basics. So unless you've got your leaflets in the van going out at every job you go out, send the apprentice up and down the street just to get that area known. You should be having leaflet drops. You should be sponsoring local events. You should be in the church magazines. You should be active, in the community. If you're not doing all of that, basically you're trying to rush. If you can't be bothered to do the basics because you think that this is faster and quicker, then I think it's a big mistake many people make. The guys that I see in my local area and that I work with all over the country that are doing the best do primitive marketing. They do new age marketing, online marketing as well, but they do the basics. And I think that's a lesson for life, isn't it? Whether it's health and fitness or like whatever, if you're not doing the basic stuff,
fundamentals,
the results, you might get some short-term wins, but it's not really going to be, a long-term strategy like weight loss. I know today I could cheat effectively. I could basically go on some jabs. I could freaking fast. I could do quick stuff sorry, I shouldn't have thrown fasting in because fasting is a great strategy. That's another podcast. But there's lots of things I could do in the short term, massively reduce my calorie intake. That yes, in the short term I might drop a load of weight, but in the long term, I'm not going to be able to sustain that, and eventually I'm going to put all that weight back on, and that goes straight into business, and I see it time and time again that people just get that shiny object syndrome, don't they? Andy's making a racket with his symbol in the background there by the
sorry,
must have dropped his cup of tea.
My pen. So Yeah, just wanted to just double back to what you're saying about the card drops. There's a lot of guys saying, "Oh, I've not got, I want to grow, but I've not got the money to be investing into, Google Ads or whatever." It's a fairly classic strategy to be fair, where it's extra effective with the trades. You should be doing you in agreement with me where it'd say do a 20 card drop, so 5 each side of the house that you've worked on and 10 across the road. Obviously, if the street's got 30 hours in it, you try and do the whole street. So whether you send the apprentice and you put it into your job card for your lads to do, or you do it yourself, for such a small amount of effort to do it, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. You can order a batch of cards for not that much money, keep them in the van, and after each job, smash them out. Not only is that going to grow the business, just because it naturally it is going to do, a different angle that's maybe not thought about with this is, especially if you do, you go to a house on that street. Let's again use the heating game. This time of year, you go and do a boiler breakdown on that street. The job transpires to need a return visit. So with some parts, you do a leaflet drop on that street, a card drop on that street. You come away. One of those people on that street rings you and says, my boiler's playing up, or I want a boiler service, or whatever it might be. You then schedule that in for the day that you go back to fix the original job. You've now got 2 customers on the same street at the same time. To go a little bit further into it, if you service both of those boilers, it means next year they're both due the service on the same day in the same street. Look at that further down the line. Imagine having enough work on the same day. It doesn't have to be on the same street, but as the business grows, it could be on the same estate or in the same patch within a few minutes drive. Imagine how effective your business could be if let's glorify it. If you had 7-8 customers on the same street, where you could then manipulate the diary and do the job for them all at the same time, on the same day every year. How effective would the diary be? You could probably do 8 jobs, 9 jobs, because there's 0 travel time. You drive to the street, or your lad drives to the street parks. If I know, does every house.
The biggest problem with that, I 100% agree. It makes everything more efficient. It just boosts awareness. The problem is it's slow, isn't it? And people are in such a rush in this day and age to try and get where they want to get to. And I understand that, and you want to move at speed. But there is some times where time is the payment. Does that make sense? Yeah. You've got to let things compound, and sometimes that means being patient, not taking on that engineer this year, but next year, once that compound effect takes in. And you probably remember, Andy, when we would have first spoke, I say it to every person that ever has a call with me, like when they first inquire about coaching and mentoring and stuff, is if you want fast and sexy, we're not the place. We're not going to fill you with bullshit strategies that work in the short term. I want to help people. I want to help tradesmen grow over a long period of time. I want them to have stable foundations. I want them to have, we want them to have stable foundations so that they can actually build and structure a business that will eventually provide for them, provide for their family, sell it in the future. There are loads of things you can do in the short term. I could tell you right now, right? I'll just put 10 grand into Google Ads, right? Flood the market, take on 3 engineers, fucking go crazy, right? Yes, your revenue might go up 100, 200, 300 grand, right? But without the infrastructure, without the structure and the foundations there, I can pretty much guarantee that 99% of those people will end up failing or getting overwhelmed, getting stressed, and basically fucking it up, and scaling back down, worse, going bust. And it's one of the biggest challenges, I think. And even with you, Andy, you wanted to move at speed, and I had to keep sort of like reining you back a little bit, didn't I?
Yeah.
Like, you're not quite like, let's just take it tight. And you've done it quite. You've been the quickest example, but even yours has been what 2 years, really, isn't it? In generalization. So.
And you can move faster, like you've just said. There's training platforms out there that will say, "Oh, we'll get you to 7 figures quickly." And the reality is, it's not that hard to do that, depending on what you do. You know what I mean? You have to, if you're a plumber that does bathrooms, for example, it wouldn't be that hard to get you to 7 figures. You get a couple more staff on, because it's the numbers that are touted are more turnover based numbers, aren't they? But it's building that foundation, as you say. That's what we try and do with the lads, is try and not get too caught up on the vanity metrics
you see, oh, my turnovers tripled or whatever. Yeah, you need turnover to make profit. Of course you do. Without the turnover going up, it's a lot harder to make profit. But fundamentally, we're in business for what's left at the end, aren't we? You know what I mean? Like, I've had businesses that have turned over £1 million, and they were making less than an employed engineer could earn. Imagine that, turning over £1 million and getting 50, 60 grand as the profit. It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
The importance of targeting that recurring work as well as being patient. Again, we've spoken in the past a few times about this isn't a fast moving industry, but you can really hack the compound growth side of things. But it does require you to slow down a little bit and target certain work. So rather than focusing on those big jobs, whatever that might be, you look at those smaller jobs. Reference the other episode we was talking about customer acquisition. Again, just to go back to that, it's pivot your marketing to target the gaps in the work that the lads who are chasing the vanity metrics don't want to get involved with. As you've just pointed out, they want the big numbers. They want more lads out in vans. They want more lads on the road, so they can say, "Oh yeah, I've got," the amount of people that I've spoke to who've been struggling, and when I've asked them like where the business is up to, so many of them will go with that straight away. "Oh yeah, I've got 8 lads out. I've got 8 vans on the road." And that tells you fuck all about your business. Like, so it's too many focus on the vanity metrics, where it's the lads that are working with their head down that tend to go the long run, don't they? Really.
I had a phone call with a lad, and he has a couple of mates close to him that look like that, because they're doing sort of faster strategies. And after we had a sort of long conversation, we realized that like he understood that it needed to be slow and steady. Increasing turnover and staff too early will just compound problems massively. Yeah. We're going off on a tangent, so that's probably a whole nother episode. So let's bring it back to marketing.
Back to marketing.
If someone, there'll be people out there now, right, that are either just starting or have been in business a little while, and they're like, what do I need to do? Like, what would you say would be the first sort of few steps that someone is just relying on word of mouth right now? What would be the next steps for those?
The leaflet drops that we just spoke about, for sure. It's the cheapest thing to do. The cost of the flyers, the leaflets is virtually nothing in the grand scheme of things. And a lot of the time, those guys have some time to do it themselves as well. So even if they're flat out, again, one of the first pieces of advice we always give is to increase your prices. Increase your prices. It will drop your workload slightly. You'll probably still make more money because, you know, if you increase your prices by 30%, you might lose 10% of your customers. Probably not, but, you know, even if you did, you've got 10% more time, 30% more money. And in that 10% time that you've freed up, you can then use that baseline strategy that I always say of doing the 20 card drop. If you've got more time, do more. You know what I mean? Make your first card order, make it 10,000 cards. You know, put a load of them in your van after every job. If you whatever time you've got, fill it with doing cards. That also allows you
nephews or whatever that could go out delivering these as well. You know, it doesn't. Yeah. You don't have to spend a lot of money, do you?
And I just wanted to reiterate again the beauty of the primitive marketing on something like leaflet drops. You can be very specific, and you can specifically target an area you want to, you know, penetrate or work in or whatever. So if you want stuff that's closer to home, in my opinion, nothing will be better than doing something like a leaflet drop. You know, you can hand pick postcodes on your online stuff, but it's not going to give you the best return because the area is going to be too small, as opposed to you get in the trenches yourself, do a card drop. You can target individual streets even, can't you? And, you know, like we said before, if you get a bit clever with it, you can then, especially if you're using a job management software like ServiceMate, backed up by a CRM like Sales Lion, you can then start to shuffle the diary as time goes on. And you'll get, not only will you get better growth in the business, you can get sort of, would you call it, more controlled growth, where, you know, like we said before, you can, if you've got someone who starts to look at the diary, again, a strategy we use in the heating business is we can keep track through Sales Lion of when all of our services are due for next year. And they will, when we reach out to those, when the girls in the office reach out to those to book them in, they can switch them around or offer them days where we are in that area. And that is something that, in my opinion, is much easier to do if you're doing the primitive stuff, because it's far more localized. So that's the first thing for sure. Again, it depends on the kind of business you've got. We've got a lad in the group, a new lad in the group, who almost all of his work is in his hometown and no further afield. So for someone like that, you're going to want to really, really push all of the primitive stuff, because you want to be represented as that local business. If you're a bit bigger and you're a bit further afield, then you're going to have to start delving into the realms of the online stuff then, aren't you? And then it depends what work you do, what you want to target, and again, how quick you want to grow. And the obvious one is how much you want to spend, I suppose. As I said before, we've had really good results from Checkatrade. But a lot of people will say it's the shittest thing ever.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting platform, isn't it? Because
it is.
You looked online and looked on the forums, you know, you seem to get, for every comment about it, most 90% are negative around things like Checkatrade. Yeah. But then within that, there are people that are doing very, very well out of it. So to move on from primitive marketing, let's move on to the sort of newer age stuff. The way Checkatrade works currently, you know, it does change. It changes quite a lot in the last year, but the way it works, for a simple explanation, is you pay a fee, and they will provide you with a certain amount of leads based on the fee that you pay. Basically, you get notified that a customer wants, I don't know, let's say a boiler service, and these are their details, and that's about as far as it goes, isn't it? They just give you the client's details. The clients have put their details in, looking for someone to do X, Y, or Z. You get them details. So why do so many people say it doesn't work?
So from what I'm aware of, it's changed quite a lot in the last, 5-6 years. Yeah. New ownership, and it's changed the trajectory of the business. So that's the first one. And again, just with the classic tradesman kind of mindset of someone who was paying maybe 200 quid 6, 7, 8 years ago to Checkatrade will tend to use that as a baseline metric and say, oh, I used it a few years ago when I was paying 200 quid and it was decent. I had a couple of boiler swaps out of it, or I had a couple of fuse board swaps out of it. And I've just gone and done it again and tried it again, and at 200 quid a month, and I had fuck all from it. Not factoring in the obvious, economical effect on that 200 quid, but the fact that it's just a bigger, more popular platform now, and that 200 quid is not worth as much within the platform as it used to be. We're spending close to 5 figures on there per month because it's very effective for what we're using it for. Admittedly, there's lots of shit that comes through. There's lots of people who want a job doing for 60 quid, boiler service for 60 quid or whatever. But again, that's marketing as a whole, though, isn't it? You have to accept that you're probably not going to get the return that you would like in the trades with the online stuff, because a lot of people use it as a hunting ground for the cheapest price. They might use it as a hunting ground just to get an idea of the cost of a job for a future. That's another common one. Oh, I'm just getting prices for now, and you've put some time input into that. Again, that's to slightly touch back on when we were talking about systems, of how it's so important to have a quoting software where not only is the software built out already to your specs, but you use the strategy of law of averages. So, for the Sparks, if they're doing a fuse board swap and they want to walk away with 600 quid from each job, you would build that template out so that it covers you for most situations. So, okay, you might need to do some adjustments, but like say, use a boiler swap as well as an example. Some jobs might need a bit more pipe work. Some jobs might need less pipe work, but if you can work out off your own numbers the law of averages, you can implement that. Because if you're spending money on, let's say, Checkatrade, and you're trying to get boiler swaps, and you're going out pricing all of those jobs, and you're going, bloody hell, I spent all this time quoting, and I've hardly had any money back, then it's not going to be the platform that you think it is. So not only is it about the platform you use, how much you spend on it, it's the kind of leads that you chase from it as well. So that just takes a bit of time to dial in what you're choosing to try and get from the platform. And so from personal experience, the jobbing work that most people don't want is what's most effectively taken from those platforms. If you want to spend £200 a month on Checkatrade and think you're going to get 5 combi swaps, then you're living in, 2010 or whatever, and you're like, whereas if you think, well, actually, I can pull out, breakdown, servicing, jobbing work, like swapping gas hobs and things like that, then you can probably do quite well from it. Yeah.
I think it's about setting realistic expectations. People get attached to the fact that someone's inquired and feel like that means that they're going to get that job, when in reality, when you're dealing with online marketing, unless these people have come directly through your own website, they're very cold leads. And what I mean by that is, like, they don't really know much about you. Basically, they've just been, they found something like Checkatrade or clicked on a Google ad or whatever it might be. So they don't really know much about you. So there's not the conversion rate, like if you speak to most people, they will expect to win sort of 40 to 60% of the jobs that they quote. When in reality, when you're dealing with cold leads, that expectation needs half. You'll be doing well if you can convert 20% of cold leads, and that might seem really low. But if you've got the right systems, you've got the right sales processes and the right follow-up, you can make it profitable. I did 4 or 5 years doing Google ads where our average conversion rate was 20%. Guess what? I made the most money I ever made in those years because we made it work. we made like you touched on, we were able to send quotes out really, really quickly, really efficiently, and it become a numbers game. You know, we buy this amount of leads, we send this amount of quotes, we're going to win on average this amount of jobs, and then we can move the map to make sure that that is a viable business model. And the bigger you get, the easier it is to operate like that. But that's why, if you remember 20 minutes ago, I mentioned about not doing online marketing too soon, because if you haven't got that infrastructure and that confidence in the pricing to know that you're pricing things correctly and profitably, you're just creating a shitstorm, aren't you?
That's just a good point. That I think it's confidence is a good word with that, because conversion rate, a lot of guys can get quite caught up on conversion rate and don't like hearing the word no, and they will often pivot their price. But you know, if you've read a book called Go for No, you'll realize that you need to get, if you're going to grow and charge what your worth is, you need to be getting a lot of no's. So to be transparent, our conversion rate is something like 8.6%, which most guys would say that's fucking horrendous. But because of our pricing structure and what we're trying to achieve, we're trying to extract from that massive of leads the customers that want to pay for a premium service, with the job management software and the booking confirmations, and all the customers that are happy to be told, yeah, I'll get to you sometime next week, probably Thursday or Friday, and they're happy with that and they'll pay the 60, 70 quid. We don't want those customers. So that contributes to that low conversion rate. So not getting too caught up on that on your marketing and then thinking this is shit, it's not working, my conversion rate's terrible. You need to try and look at a zoomed out perspective of it. And I think, like you said, if you do that too soon, a lot of guys struggle with that. And that's, you know, that's another such a common thing on the forums of, I can't charge that price, my customers won't pay it. And that's where the marketing has to come in and play its part. It's like, they probably won't, because you've probably been giving too much value previously. Therefore, the next option is for you to invest in marketing, bring in new customers who won't have a baseline to work from. Your value, which has been over delivered, will be then more in line with the new pricing that you're going to give to these new customers. And it's being accepting that marketing is necessary to grow, to get you out of that. And it's so common, that, isn't it? Like that you see on the forum, I can't charge that, my customers won't pay it. And to me, I just say, well, you've answered your own question. Like, you know what you need to do. You're essentially, you know what you need to do. Just fucking do it. Like,
yeah, no, definitely. On that note, I think that is a good point to end this session on. We're going to obviously be talking a lot more on marketing and everything over time. Any closing words, Andy?
No, yeah, just if you want to grow, you need to invest in marketing. If you want to charge your worth, you need to invest in marketing. If you're busy, you still need to invest in marketing because your prices are probably too low. But yeah, one last thing, and I say this to a lot of the lads. If you wanted to start a business, you know, if me and you started a business tomorrow, a brand new heating business, and you said you're going to do it the old school way, off word of mouth, because you want to build that kind of business, I'm going to say, no, we're going to spend, 15 grand a month on marketing. You'll be left behind almost instantly. And that's something that a lot of lads struggle to accept. They think, oh no, I want to do it my way. It's like, that way just doesn't work anymore. Like that, you know what I mean? That's on, reviews are the new word of mouth. Google search is the new asking your mate down the pub. Oh, you don't know such a lad that does such a thing, do you? That's the new thing. People don't do it. They'll ask ChatGPT or they'll Google search it. And that's, you know what I mean? That's, you absolutely have to do it. But the same applies to if you have a pre-existing business, but you've now decided it's time to move forward with that business. So even if you've been doing it 30 years, but you've now decided it's time to move forward, you're going to have to invest in marketing, because, to recoin that phrase from 2 minutes ago, your existing customers won't pay the new pricing structure because you've been over delivering on value, and your only solution is marketing. So yeah, that's my closing word.
Cool. See you all on the next episode, everyone.